my name ain't falling. Every weight on my back, still I stand here tall. Moving through the motion, still giving it my all. I'm busy with the grind, don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time will.
There's a woman I'll call Sarah. Successful marketing executive, beautiful apartment in the city, 3,000 Instagram followers. She came to see me not because anything was wrong exactly, but because everything felt empty. She said, I'm surrounded by people all day. She told me, Zoom meetings, Slack messages, dinner with colleagues. I go to networking events. I text my friends. But Pastor Carey, I wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like I'm on a desert island. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Because Sarah wasn't describing personal failure. She was describing something much bigger, something I've witnessed growing in my 30 years of pastoral work, like a shadow stretching across an entire generation. She was describing what I call the architecture of disconnection. See, we think loneliness is what happens when you're alone. But what if I told you that loneliness is actually what happens when we build our lives, our cities, our workplaces, our daily routines, even our relationships, in ways that are architecturally hostile to human connection? What if the design is broken, not the people? I'm Carey Michael West. You might know me as Pastor Carey or PK or just Carey. And for 3 decades, I've been studying human consciousness, love, and the invisible structures that either support or sabotage our ability to truly connect with ourselves, with each other, with something larger than ourselves. Welcome to People Architecture. This isn't another self-help podcast promising 5 easy steps to happiness. This is an invitation to wake up, to clearly see what's actually happening, and to recognize that we're at a pivotal moment, individually and collectively, where consciousness isn't optional anymore. It's essential. Over the next 6 months, we're going to explore why developing both secular and spiritual consciousness matters more now than ever before. We're going to look at the data, the research, the hard truths. But more importantly, we're going to talk about what's possible when we choose to live differently. Today, we start with recognition, not fear, just clear-eyed recognition, because you can't fix what you can't see. Let's begin. Let me give you some numbers, not to scare you, but to validate what you might already be feeling. 30% of American adults, that's roughly 1 in 3, say they experience feelings of loneliness at least once a week. 10% say they're lonely every day, every single day. Globally, 1 in 6 people worldwide is affected by loneliness. That's not a small problem. That's a pandemic we're not talking about nearly enough. But here's where it gets really interesting and disturbing. The health risks of prolonged isolation are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that sink in. Your loneliness, that thing you might dismiss as just a bad feeling or something I need to get over, is as dangerous to your body as a serious smoking habit. Loneliness increases the risk of stroke by 32% and heart disease by 29%. It doubles your risk of depression. In older adults, poor social connections are linked to a 50% increased risk of developing dementia. And get this, Loneliness is linked to an estimated 100 deaths per hour. That's more than 871,000 deaths annually. We're not talking about a mental health issue that exists in isolation, pun intended. We're talking about a crisis that touches every aspect of human well being: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Now you might be thinking, okay, Pastor Carey, I get it. Loneliness is bad, but I'm not lonely. I've got friends, I've got family. I'm good. Hold that thought. Because here's what's tricky about loneliness: it's not about being alone. Loneliness is a subjective, distressing experience that results from perceived isolation or inadequate, meaningful connections. It's the discrepancy between an individual's preferred and actual experience. Let me say that differently. You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly lonely. You can have a loving family, a full social calendar, a job where you interact with dozens of people daily, and still wake up at 3 a.m. like you're screaming into the void with no one listening. In one survey, a person described having plenty of family members around, but not feeling appreciated by them. Another said they were surrounded by people who only are present in my life because I am useful to them. That's not loneliness as lack of people. That's loneliness as lack of genuine connection, as lack of being truly seen, truly known, truly valued for who you actually are beneath all the performance and productivity. And that kind of loneliness, it's everywhere. 3 decades of pastoral work have taught me something profound. When someone comes to me feeling broken, anxious, depressed, addicted, lost, 90% of the time, what they're actually experiencing is disconnection. Disconnection from themselves, from others, from purpose, from the sacred, however they understand it. And here's what breaks my heart: they blame themselves. They think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy? Why can't I not just connect? But what if nothing's wrong with you? What if you're having a completely appropriate response to a world that's been designed, often accidentally, sometimes deliberately, to keep you isolated, distracted, consuming, performing, but never quite settling into yourself, never quite coming home? 73% of Americans surveyed selected technology as contributing to loneliness in the country. 66% cited insufficient time with family. 62% said people are overworked or too busy or tired. 58% named living in a society that is too individualistic as a cause. Read that list again: technology, time scarcity, exhaustion, hyper-individualism. These aren't personal failings. These are systemic conditions. These are design flaws in how we've organized modern life. And consciousness, the kind we're going to be exploring throughout this series, starts with seeing these systems clearly, not with judgment, but with clarity. Because once you see the architecture, you can begin to redesign it. So, how did we get here? How did we build a world where connection, the most fundamental human need, became optional, difficult, almost radical? Let me paint you a picture of what's changed. 100 years ago, if you wanted to talk to someone, you walked to their house. You sat on their porch. You were physically present in their space, and they in yours. Your neighborhood was your social world. Your church, your union hall, your local tavern, these were third places where connection just happened. You didn't have to schedule a connection, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. Now, work occupies an increasing share of adult life, yet offers fewer social anchors than before. Remote work can reduce casual interactions that once built camaraderie. Yeah. Cities are more mobile than ever. Household sizes have decreased. Marriage and long term cohabitation occur later in life. Religious participation has declined. Neighborhoods are more fragmented due to mobility and housing turnover. Think about that for a moment. Every single social structure that used to create automatic connection, family living nearby, stable neighborhoods, workplace community, religious institutions, has weakened or disappeared for millions of people. And what replaced it? Well, we got efficiency, we got convenience, we got the ability to work from anywhere, order everything, connect digitally to the entire world. But somewhere in that trade, we lost friction. And friction, it turns out, is essential for connection. Let me explain what I mean by friction. Friction is bumping into your neighbor when you're getting the mail and having a 5-minute conversation about nothing in particular. Friction is being at the office and grabbing coffee with a colleague who's having a rough day. Friction is your kids playing with the neighborhood kids in the backyard while the adults chat over the fence. Friction is the unscheduled, unoptimized, inefficient messiness of human proximity. And we've systematically removed almost all of it. We don't bump into neighbors because we go from garage to garage. We don't chat with colleagues because we're on Zoom calls back to back. We don't have spontaneous conversations because we're all wearing headphones, staring at a screen, moving through public space like we're in our individual bubbles. Now we've become, in the words of one researcher I read, alone together, physically proximate but psychologically isolated. 66% of Americans say technology helps them build relationships, yet 73% view it as a contributor to loneliness. That right there is the paradox of our time. Technology connects us to more people than ever before, but it often disconnects us from ourselves and from the depth of presence that real intimacy requires. I'm not anti technology. I'm using technology right now to reach you, but I am asking us to be conscious about it, to recognize that a tool designed to connect us can also fragment our attention, commodify our relationships, and train us to prefer curated performances over authentic presence. And when we're not conscious, when we're just drifting through these systems, letting them shape us without questioning them, that's when the architecture of disconnection becomes invisible. That's when we start thinking the problem is us, not the water we're swimming in. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not romanticizing the past. The good old days weren't good for everyone. There was less freedom, less mobility, more oppression, more constraint. What I'm saying is this: we gained important things: individual freedom, choice, opportunity, but we didn't replace the connective tissue that those old structures provided. We just tore it out and assumed people would figure out how to rebuild it again themselves. And some people can. Some people have the resources, the time, the emotional bandwidth, the social skills to construct robust support systems from scratch in a fragmented world. But most people are just trying to survive, trying to pay rent, raise kids, manage aging parents, deal with health issues, advance careers. Most people don't have the bandwidth to also become social architects, designing connection from the ground up in a world that makes it harder at every turn. As traditional social anchors loosen, individuals must construct their own support systems, an emotionally demanding task that requires time, stability, and effort, all of which are in short supply for many people. So we end up with what we have now: an estimated 52 million adults struggling with loneliness, mostly in silence, mostly thinking it's their fault. It's not your fault, it's the architecture. Here's something I learned early in my ministry. Your body is smarter than your mind. What I mean is this: your rational brain can be convinced of all sorts of things. I'm fine. I just need to try harder. Everyone else seems to be handling this, so I should too. But your body doesn't lie. Your body keeps the score, as trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk famously said. And right now, our collective body is screaming. Anxiety disorders are at an all time high. Depression, addiction, autoimmune conditions, chronic pain, insomnia, the list goes on. And here's what's fascinating to me: we keep treating these as individual pathologies. We medicate them, and sometimes that's necessary. Please don't hear me dismissing the real value of medication. But we rarely step back and ask, what if these aren't primarily chemical imbalances? What if these are responses? What if these are your body's way of saying, hey, this environment you're in, it's not safe, it's not nourishing, it's making us sick? 81% of adults who were lonely also said they suffered from anxiety or depression, compared to 29% of those who were less lonely. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction, it's information. It's your nervous system trying to protect you in an environment that feels perpetually threatening, because it is. Think about it. We're biologically wired for small tribes, for face to face connection, for physical touch, for eye contact, for knowing we belong to a group that will show up for us when things get hard. And instead, we're living in megacities where we don't know our neighbors. We're working jobs that treat us as interchangeable parts. We're moving through public spaces where making eye contact is considered weird. we're having most of our social interactions through screens that literally prevent physical presence. Is it any wonder our nervous systems are freaking out? You're not overreacting. Your body is correctly perceiving that something is deeply wrong with the way we're living. Now, here's where it gets both harder and more hopeful. The hardness is this: we can't just leave. We can't abandon modern life and go live on a commune. Though, believe me, I've had that fantasy more times than I can count. Most of us are more embedded in systems we can't fully escape. We have jobs, mortgages, families, responsibilities. So the question becomes, how do we live consciously within systems that are unconsciously designed? How do we create pockets of genuine connection in a disconnected world? How do we tend to our nervous systems when the external environment remains stressful? And that's where the work begins. That's where consciousness becomes not just helpful, but essential. Because consciousness is what allows you to see the system without being entirely determined by it. Consciousness is what creates the space between stimulus and response. Consciousness is what lets you say, okay, I can't change the whole world today, but I can change how I show up in this moment. And when enough individuals start showing up differently, more present, more aware, more connected, the architecture itself begins to shift. Let me tell you about something I witnessed last year. I was at a coffee shop, one of those third places we've been talking about, and I watched this unfold. A young woman was sitting alone at a table, clearly upset, crying quietly, and I watched person after person walk by her. Not one, not out of cruelty, out of uncertainty, out of not wanting to intrude, out of not knowing the social script for this moment. Finally, an older woman, must have been in her 70s, walked over, sat down, and just said, "Honey, are you okay? Can I sit with you for a minute?" And the young woman just broke, started sobbing, and this stranger held her hand across the table for 10 minutes, didn't fix anything, didn't offer advice, just was present. When they finally stood up, the young woman said, "Thank you. I was feeling so alone. You have no idea what this means." And the older woman said, "Oh, honey, I do know. We've all been there. That's why I stopped." Now, that encounter happened because that older woman was conscious. She saw someone suffering and she chose connection over convenience. She chose presence over discomfort. And I guarantee you, both of those women left that coffee shop changed because that's what genuine connection does. It doesn't just help, it transforms. That's the power we have even in disconnected systems, the power to show up, to see each other, to choose connection when everything else is pulling us toward isolation. Your body knows you need this. It's been trying to tell you. Maybe it's time to listen. All right, so we've looked at the problem. We've named the architecture of disconnection. We've acknowledged that this isn't personal failure, but systemic design. Now I want to talk about what I see as possible. Because honestly, this is why I'm doing this podcast. This is what keeps me up at night. Not with anxiety, but with hope. After years of watching people struggle, watching systems fail, watching community after community fragment, I'm also watching something else emerge. And it gives me tremendous hope. I'm watching people wake up. Not just a few people, not just the spiritual seekers or the unusually self aware. I'm watching regular people, accountants and teachers and nurses and software engineers, starting to ask fundamental questions about how they're living. Questions like, why am I exhausted all the time? Why do I feel empty even when I achieve what I'm supposed to want? Why do my relationships feel so transactional? What's the point of all of this? Those aren't signs of crisis. Those are signs of consciousness trying to break through. And when consciousness breaks through, when people start seeing clearly, everything becomes possible. Because you can't make different choices until you see that you're making choices at all. So here's what I see as possible based on everything I know about human nature, consciousness, and the patterns I've witnessed over 3 decades. First possibility. Individual awakening at scale. That means we're living through what might be the most concentrated period of spiritual seeking in human history. The spiritual products and services market is exploded from $4.2 billion to a projected $9.6 billion. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. A lot of that is commercialization, spiritual bypassing, and people trying to purchase transformation instead of doing the work. We'll talk about that in future episodes. But underneath the marketplace noise, something real is happening. People are meditating, they're going to therapy, they're reading about consciousness and trauma and healing, they're questioning materialism and success narratives. They're seeking meaning. And that seeking, that's the beginning. That's the crack where the light gets in. What I see as possible is that this individual awakening that could reach a tipping point, that enough people could wake up to their own patterns, their own pain, their own possibility, that the collective consciousness of our culture begins to shift. Not overnight, not everyone at once, but enough people in enough places making different choices that the architecture itself has to adapt. Second possibility, rebuilding social infrastructure. 75% of Americans surveyed said they wanted more activities and fun community events where they live, and public spaces that are more accessible and connection focused, like green spaces and playgrounds. People know what they need. They're not confused about this. They need places to gather. They need reasons to show up. They need infrastructure that supports connection instead of preventing it. And I'm watching it start to happen. Countries like Japan are passing legislation to address loneliness. Denmark has introduced a loneliness strategy with 75 cross-governmental actions. The U.S. Surgeon General has issued guidance. The World Health Organization launched a commission on social connection. Social prescribing movements are emerging in 24 countries where healthcare professionals connect patients to community opportunities that enhance well-being, like arts, physical activity, nature experiences, all of which foster social connections. This isn't just idealistic dreaming. This is happening. Governments, healthcare systems, communities, they're all starting to recognize that social connection is infrastructure. It's not a nice to have, it's a survival need. What I see as possible is that in the next decade, we could see a renaissance of third places, coffee shops designed for conversation, not laptops, parks with programming that brings neighbors together, co working spaces that prioritize community, not just productivity, urban planning that values pedestrian friendly neighborhoods where you might actually bump into people, and individuals creating their own third spaces. For example, hosting regular dinner parties, starting book clubs, organizing neighborhood groups, building the connective tissue that's been missing. Third possibility, the evolution of work culture. Right now, work is one of the primary sources of disconnection. We're overworked, burned out, and even when we're in offices, we're often isolated by headphones and screens. But I'm watching some companies start to wake up. They're recognizing that human thriving isn't separate from productivity. It's the foundation of it. They're creating spaces for genuine interaction. They're valuing relationships, not just deliverables. They're understanding that when people feel connected and valued, they don't just work better, they become more creative, more resilient, more committed. What I see as possible is work culture shifting from extraction to nourishing, from viewing employees as resources to be maximized, to viewing them as whole humans who need community, meaning, and rest. Will every company do this? No. But if enough do, it creates competitive pressure. It becomes a retention strategy. It becomes the new normal. Fourth possibility, consciousness as contagious. Here's something beautiful about human neurobiology. We're wired to attune to each other. When you're in the presence of someone who's genuinely present, genuinely grounded, genuinely conscious, your nervous system feels it and it starts to entrain to that frequency. Calmness is contagious. Presence is contagious. Consciousness is contagious. What I see as possible is individuals who do their inner work, who develop their own consciousness, who heal their own patterns, who learn to stay present even in chaos. They are becoming beacons, becoming stabilizing forces in their families, their workplaces, their communities. Not in a way that's performative or self righteous, just in a way that's real, where people around them start to feel something's different about this person. They're not drowning in the chaos like everyone else. They're somehow okay. I wonder how they do that. And curiosity spreads, and practices spread, and slowly, one person at a time, consciousness spreads. Fifth possibility, redefining what it means to be human. This may sound grandiose, but bear with me. For the last few centuries, especially in Western culture, we've defined humans primarily as individuals, as consumers, as producers, as rational, autonomous agents pursuing self interest. And that definition has given us some good things: freedom, innovation, progress. But it's also given us the loneliness epidemic because it's not the whole truth about who we are. The deeper truth, the truth that indigenous cultures have always known, that contemplative traditions have always taught, that modern neuroscience is now confirming, is that we're fundamentally relational beings. We don't exist as separate selves, we exist in connection. Our sense of self is created through relationship. Our well being is inseparable from the well being of others. What I see as possible is a cultural shift from hyper individualism to what I call connected individualism, where we honor individual uniqueness and freedom, but we do it within a framework of interdependence, where we understand that taking care of myself and taking care of my community aren't competing values. They are the same value, where success isn't measured just by what I've achieved for myself, but by how much I've contributed to collective thriving. That's a different architecture entirely. That's a world built on connection instead of isolation, on belonging instead of competition, on we instead of just me. Now, am I saying that all of this will definitely happen? No, I'm not naive. There are some powerful forces invested in keeping things as they are. Disconnection is profitable. Distraction is profitable. Isolation makes people easier to market to, easier to control, easier to exploit. And there are legitimate questions about whether we can change fast enough, whether we have the collective will, whether the momentum of the current system is just too strong. And here's what I know from 3 decades of this work: change happens when it seems impossible, right up until the moment it becomes inevitable. I've watched people who seem permanently broken suddenly heal. I've watched communities that seem beyond repair suddenly come together. I've watched individuals who seem hopelessly stuck suddenly wake up and transform their entire lives. And every time, it started with consciousness, with someone choosing to see clearly, to feel fully, to show up authentically, to stop performing and start being real. That choice is always available. And when enough people make it, the architecture shifts. That's what I see as possible. That's what I'm inviting you into. Not certainty, not easy answers, but possibility. Grounded, real, tangible possibility. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at the loneliness epidemic, the data, the health impacts, the systemic causes. We've explored how we built an architecture of disconnection. We've acknowledged that your body is responding appropriately to inappropriate environments. And we've opened up what might be possible if we choose consciousness over autopilot. Now I want to leave you with something to carry forward, not as homework. I'm not interested in adding to your already overwhelming to-do list, but as an invitation, as a question to live with. Here it is. What would your life look like if connection was your default setting? Not what should it look like, not what would it look like if you were a better person, more disciplined, more together, but what would it actually look like if you oriented your daily life around connection? Connection with yourself, with others, with meaning, with the sacred. What would you do differently? What would you stop doing? Where would you invest your time and energy? What would you let go of? Just sit with that question. Don't rush to answer it. Let it percolate. Let it work on you over the coming days and weeks. Because here's what I've learned. The right questions are more transformative than the right answers. Questions open us. Answers can close us. Questions open and keep us curious. Answers can make us rigid. And unconsciousness? Consciousness lives in the space of not knowing, in the willingness to stay curious, even when it's uncomfortable, in the capacity to look at your life with fresh eyes instead of the same tired narratives. Now, I want to invite you into something bigger than just listening to this podcast. What we're building at People Architecture is a community, a growing ecosystem of individuals who are committed to waking up, to developing consciousness, both secular and spiritual, to doing the inner work that transforms outer reality. So visit us at peoplearchitecture.org. There you'll find a growing library of resources on personal development, consciousness studies, practices for presence, and frameworks for understanding yourself and the world more clearly. We're adding new courses every month on topics ranging from meditation and mindfulness to communication skills, from understanding trauma to developing emotional intelligence, from contemplative practices to practical tools for building community. And here's what makes this different from the thousands of other personal development platforms out there. We're not selling you transformation. We're inviting you into it. We're not promising quick fixes. We're offering depth. Becoming a member gives you access to all of it. But more than that, it connects you to a community of people who are on this same journey, people who are asking the same questions, people who are choosing consciousness in a world that makes it remarkably difficult. Because here's the thing, you can't do this work alone. I mean, you can try, but consciousness in isolation is limited. Real transformation happens in relationship, in community, in the friction and challenge and support of other humans who see you, who call you forward, who won't let you hide in your patterns. Once we have enough interest, and we're getting close, we're going to organize discussion groups where you can dive deeper into these topics with others in your area or even online. We're going to offer workshops where you can practice these skills in real time. We're going to host retreats where you can step out of the noise of daily life and into genuine presence. This is just the beginning, episode 1 of a 26-episode journey. And beyond that, a lifetime journey of waking up. So here's my invitation. Don't just consume this content. Engage with it. Join the conversation. Come to peoplearchitecture.org and become part of what we're building together. Because the architecture of disconnection, it wasn't built by any one person. and it won't be transformed by any one person. But it can be transformed by many people making different choices, many people showing up differently, many people choosing consciousness over autopilot, connection over isolation, presence over performance. You don't have to be extraordinary to do this. You don't have to be further along than you are. You just have to be willing to see, willing to feel, willing to show up. That's all consciousness requires. Not perfection, just willingness. Before we close, I want to acknowledge something. If you're listening to this and feeling overwhelmed or hopeless, or like the problem is just too big, I get it. I really do. Some days I feel it too. The weight of it all, the impossibility of it all, the grief of watching so much suffering that seems so unnecessary. But then I remember something one of my early mentors told me. He said, Carrie, you can't save the world, but you can love the person in front of you. And if everyone did that, just love the person in front of them, the world would be saved. So if you can't take on the whole loneliness epidemic today, don't. Just choose connection in one moment. Make eye contact with the barista. Ask your partner how they're really doing. Call a friend you've been meaning to reach out to. Sit with yourself for 5 minutes without distraction. One moment, one choice, one conscious act of connection. That's how this begins. That's how anything begins. Not with a whole mountain, but with a single step. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to listen, to question, to stay curious. I'm PK, Pastor Carey, and I'll be back next week with episode 2, where we're going to explore something that's tearing our society apart. When politics became identity, and what it costs us when we choose tribal certainty over authentic connection. Until then, remember, you're not broken. The architecture is. And architecture can be redesigned. Go to peoplearchitecture.org. Join us. Let's build something better together.
Woke up early, but the world ain't calling. Clock keeps spinning, but my name ain't falling. Every weight on my back, still I stand here tall. Moving through the motion, still giving it my all. I'm busy with the grind, don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, but the world's still off track. Streetlights on, but they don't know my tune. Crowds come and go, but they leave by noon. I speak my truth, but the echo stays still. I'm busy with the climb, but the summit's uphill. I'm busy with the grind, but it don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, but the world's still off track. Smoke in my mind, but the fire ain't mine. Carrying weight of years that ain't even my time. I roll with the tide, yet it won't roll with me. Making moves in a game where I can't hold the key. I'm busy with the grind, it don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, I'm busy with the grind.